to the voter who may not be that familiar with your work, what do you say to them as to why they should vote for you in November?
Well, I grew up in this community and I've lived here my whole life. I've chose to do that. My family's from here. Parents were career educators, graduated from University of Tennessee with a degree in education. But I've always, my whole political career has been that I've always tried to look out for the little man and woman, the people that do most of the living and dying in our community and most of the work, but seem to be underrepresented. And I've tackled a lot of tough issues. We've addressed, my congressional career is much like my mayoral career and my state Senate career. I kept taxes low. I fought to pay down debt, which is foreign in Washington. I haven't passed a budget in over 20 years. So I've kind of made those my hallmarks of limited government. But I've been very successful at passing legislation as a freshman. I've passed several pieces of legislation. It's primarily looking after folks that are, as the Bible says, the least amongst us. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that. And I've also, the most important thing I've done with politically, though, is surrounded myself with good people. They are all hardworking folks, and they know that constituent service is where it's at. The headlines, that keeps you in the buzz, but I believe what makes you successful is looking after folks when they got problems. So that's pretty much me. And I'm a family man. I'm married to a wonderful woman, and I adopted her little girl, and she's mine now, and I have a wonderful life.
Have you been able to work with the other side on any issues and get things done impacting folks here in East Tennessee?
Oh, absolutely. I've I worked with the other side on legislation dealing with veterans and also with folks that are just getting out of prison, making sure that they have access to entrepreneurs so that we don't have that revolving door of recycling those folks back into prison. But as a freshman, there's people that have been there decades that have never passed legislation. And I've been fortunate as a freshman to sponsor and co-sponsor several pieces of legislation that have actually passed the House. So, and you cannot do that without bipartisan support. When I was in the state legislature, I did that. I carried probably more legislation just about anybody in either party. And the way I did that was by working across the aisle. One of my colleagues told me one time, if everybody's a little uneasy about a piece of legislation, it's probably a pretty good piece of legislation because everybody has a piece of it and they're kind of watching the other guy, keeping them honest.
Well, and coronavirus obviously has really consumed this year. What do you make of the federal government's response to COVID-19 altogether, and what do you want to see happen going forward?
I think it's been what we would expect. I think it's been pretty poor. We loaded up with pork projects. The Speaker of the House delayed it many days so she could get funding for the Kennedy Performing Arts Center, and one bill was delayed. They were trying to get something for the marijuana farm in California and things like that. But both sides do it. You can't really point the finger at the Democrats because the Republicans, before I was in Congress, I doubt it would have changed much, but I would hope that I would have been a voice of reason when we controlled all three branches of government and we failed to do something about the wall, our southern border, actually, healthcare, and passing a budget, which both parties, that's the key thing. That's really what you're constitutionally mandated to do, and we're derelict in our duties. So I would think that we need to focus on those kind of things first and reach across the aisle to do that. But nobody does that because Washington, D.C. is all about power. It's about who's in power. If you're not in power, you want it from somebody else, and the heck with the country and the Constitution for that matters. So I would hope that in any new COVID funding mechanisms or bills, that it would be responsible to the people that are hurting and quit with all the nonsense of like when we bailed out the bankers and no one went to jail. And it just, those kind of things. That's why I sponsored legislation that if there is in fact an airline bailout, that none of the money goes to their corporate bigwigs for buyouts and things like that. That it actually actually affects the workers on the ground.
I'll ask the same. I'll ask the same thing of your opponent here, but I'm curious to know what you think separates the two of you most.
I would probably say values. You know, I value our law enforcement. I value the rule of law. She seems like a very nice person, but I differ with her on a lot of those things, on life, the abortion issue, the Second Amendment. As I said, defunding the police, and they'll be quick to say, "Oh, we don't want to defund the police. We just want to put the money elsewhere." And so, in reality, they're defunding the police. You know, I support a border wall. I think we've got laws in place, and we should obey those laws. And with that comes a lot of other responsibilities. And also, I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. I think people ought to be responsible for their actions. You know, we always seem to want to blame guns for violence, but we don't blame a spoon and a fork for obesity. So, you know, it's just, I think it's a way of thinking. Being from East Tennessee, growing up here, I think I share the common values that most of the folks do here.
Well, and those are really my campaign questions. I do have one other topical question. I'll also ask Renee Hoyos this question.
Sure.
But you're sitting congressman right now, and it's being discussed on all the major outlets. So this audio from Bob Woodward, where the president says that he intentionally downplayed the coronavirus to avoid panic. I know there's two different perceptions of that audio, and I'm just curious to know what your take is.
Well, I think it's an election year type deal. I guess if Biden had said that, we'd probably, and he was in power, we'd probably do. But the reality is, it doesn't change anything. Congress is the ones that enact the legislation to make changes. People want to blame the president, but it's actually Congress's inactivity or overactivity that have caused most of the problems. I don't see any need to cause panic in the world or in our community. I remember a few years back when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, he made a statement about some market, and it just tanked. So you know, and they said he's not being responsible. Well, I think the president was being responsible by not panicking. I don't see, when you're at the head of a major organization or anywhere, panicking does not solve anything. And I think he's had a steady hand on the till, and that's what he's had to do. And so Woodward and all those guys, that's their game, and they're in the business of selling books, and they do it very well.